Good afternoon, and thanks to the organizers at the Shi'a Institute, Vinay, Sajjad, for the invitation, and all the people behind the scene. So my presentation is about Sheikh Mahmud Shabistari's, basically the influence of Ibn Arabi in Persian classical Sufi literature, or poetry, if I want to sum it up. I will introduce who Shabistari was, what is Gulshan-i Raz is about. We'll look at some of the examples. I'll walk you through the 15 questions posed to Sheikh Mahmud by Ibn Arabi, and we will look at some of the famous commentaries written on Gulshan-i Raz, and then we will focus on Lahiji's Ijaz, and then we'll see what takes us there. So, he is well known as Sheikh Mahmud Shabistari, or Sheikh Mahmud. His full name, Sheikh Mahmud ibn Aminuddin Abdul Karim bin Yahya Shabistari. As for his religion, some scholars believe that either he was Sunni, they don't have enough information about Shi'ism. Among the contemporary scholars, Shimel and Sayyid Hussein al-Nasr believe that he was a Shi'a. And Hajj Khalifa claims he was a Shia Muslim, and Henry Corban believes that Shabistari was a Shia because Ismailis tend to write a lot of commentaries on Gulshan-i Raz. It's translated as the Rose Garden of Mystery. Garden is a place that we feel good when we walk through, full of flowers and plants. So apparently the name appeared in his heart in the state of ecstasy. So it's a garden of mystical words, and those mysticism comes from Ibn Arabi. It's combination or mystical and philosophical poetry collection in the genre of Masnavi, didactic poetry. More or less it's about 1,000 verses or distiches, and it's a response to 15 questions posed to him by Amir Hussein Haravi. Now, some commentaries, such as Lahiji's Ijaz, claim that it comes in 18 questions. That's why I mentioned both 15 and 18. And Haravi's chain of initiation goes directly. So Haravi also, it's important. Haravi poses this question, he was a Sufi, and Shabistari was a Sufi. When we look at the poetry, you will notice that they both know what they are talking about. Right away, the questions start from philosophy. Who are we? What are we talking about? What kind of thought we have? And by thought, they mean thinking about God. So he was from Sohrawardi order, and Shabistani used rational, inspirational, and intuitive sciences in composing the verses. The book is structured as an explanation for divine riddles and enigmatic concepts concerning the relationship between God, humankind, and cosmos. So think of a haram, a triangle. At the top we have God, and then on the bottom it's human being and cosmos, the universe. They both created by God, and God presents himself to us through us, thanks to Professor Lawson. The reason for you framed it nicely. I really like that remarks that you put it. The reason for the philosophical question is why Haravi posed these questions to question his spirituality. Scholars agree that no, that's not the case. It's mainly to engage in a conversation, Sufi conversation, and according to Abdul Hussein Zarrinkou, it's to encourage Shabistari to write the answer in the form of Sufi manuals for his students, same as Husamuddin Jalabi that did to Rumi and asked him to write the Masnavi. As for the subjects and themes, Shabistari presents his answer encapsulating the theosophy and Sufi thought of Akbarian Sufism, even though he doesn't mention the name of Ibn Arabi. Different subjects that as we go through the poetry, we will see on God's essence and existence, Zat and Wujud, God's attributes, Sifat al-Ilahiyya, perfect human being, Insan al-Kamil, divine oneness, Wahdat, Wahdat versus Kesrat. It repeats a lot in the poetry. Annihilation, Fana, subsistence, Baqa, eternity and created, Qadim and Hadis. Gulshan-i Raz is among the most popular Sufi texts upon which numerous commentaries have been written. And the book was particularly favored by Shia commentators in Iran. Also, scholars in Turkey and Pakistan wrote commentaries and scholarly works on Shabistari's work. They provided Shia interpretation either on the verses, or they consulted Shia sources and hadith to comment upon the verses. Through the work of commentators, this is what is clear to me. Rather than influencing later poets, or genre of literature, it's the work of commentators and sharahun that transmitted the work of Ibn Arabi through the poetry of Shabistari. Let us look at briefly some of the commentary written on Gulshan-i Raz. I mentioned some of the famous one, which has a title. Some of them are known as Sharh Gulshan, because the author is unknown, or the name is unknown, or the cover is missing. For various reasons, we don't have enough information who wrote it. These are some of the famous ones. I highlighted Mafatih al-Ijaz fi Sharh Gulshan-i Raz by Lahiji. The second one, Sharh Sainuddin ibn Turke, Nasa'im al-Gulshan, Sharh Nakhjabani, Sharh Ardabili Ilahi, and Sharh Gulshan-i Raz Wusuq al-Hukama are among the famous ones. Why? Because they cover the entire Gulshan, and they are kind of independent in a way that either they approach Gulshan more from the grammatical perspective, they provided meaning from the Persian and Arabic grammar, or from theological perspective, or from philosophical perspective. Each has a different approach. Also, some commentators, or some scholars, I would say, such as Dabani, Faiz Kashani, or Abdurrahim Khalvati, wrote a short and summary form of commentary, just commenting on the difficult verses of the Gulshan. Now, Gulshan is a difficult text. I mean, it's the language of Ibn Arabi. So when they say commenting on the most difficult, only they know what they mean, probably. And among the contemporary Iranian Shia scholars who have been writing on Gulshan or giving online lectures, we can mention Ibrahimi Dinani, Mohsen Kadibar, and Ilahi Qumshi. They have their own websites, and this tells how rich is the text and how popular is Gulshan-i Raz even today. Next to Rumi's Masnavi, Gulshan-i Raz. This I needed to highlight. Of course, at the beginning, Sheikh Mahmoud starts by praising and giving praise to God. And then I would like to walk you through his garden. Let's see his plants, and let's smell the fragrance of his flowers, very briefly. The first question, Q&A, responds very briefly to the questions. The first question, which sets the foundation. What is tafakkur? By tafakkur, we could mention what is thinking, what is contemplation. Here, I am leaning more on contemplation. Also, Leonard Lewison focuses more on contemplation or meditation, because it's not just thinking. What is tafakkur? Of course, both Haravi and Sabzawari mean, Sheikh Mahmoud Shabistari, mean that by tafakkur they're talking about God. What is tafakkur? The answer by Sheikh Mahmoud is turning towards truth from falsehood. So what kind of thought leads us toward the truth? The answer is by thinking on God's abundances, on bounties, Allah, what He created, not by thinking on His essence, on His Zat, because that would be misleading, because the knowledge given to human being is not enough, or it's limited, so human being will be misguided. Who am I? What is this I-ness? Because it is me who is talking about God. It is me as a human being who is thinking about God. What's the role of I here? And the answer is, this I is a manifestation of that wujud, that wahdat, appears as multiplicity. Here he is talking about Wahdat versus Kasrat. All of us, or the cosmos, are manifestation of Kasrat versus Wahdat. Who is the traveler of the path? Who is the wayfarer? Who is the seeker? How do we define the perfect human being? Insan al-Kamil is the Sufi who walks in the path. The one who is aware of his origin. He knows he comes from what? He comes from him and he goes back to him. Who attains the secret to unity, to Wahdat? The person who is not trapped in the inner stages of the self and ego. If both knower and known are the same purpose and they are from the pure essence, then what is the purpose of this handful of dust, referring to human being which is created from dust? If everything is him, refers to Wahdatul Wujud, then what's the function of creation of human being here? The answer is the dust is illuminated from sun. It's important for human being or the cosmos to be created so the God could be known. It refers to the Hadith Qudsi that I wanted to be known, I created the world, I created the human being. Question 7. Please follow the chain of the question. What is tafakkur? Who is qualified to engage in tafakkur? Who is I? And what is God? Then here I am the truth. An al-haq of al-Hallaj. Louis Massignon argues that after Hallaj, scholars are divided into two categories. Some favors Hallaj's shathiyat or blasphemous utterances when he said at the state of ecstasy, he said, Ana al-haq, I am the truth. And some would condemn him. Here, Rumi is in favor of Hallaj, and here we see him clearly. So the beginning, again, I'm going back to the first question. What is tafakkur? Tafakkur is to thinking about God, to reach God. The goal is to understand and to experience fana, annihilation. Now, in this state of ecstasy, when we experience fana, is it okay, like Hallaj, to utter that blasphemous or appeared, or so to speak, blasphemous utterances? According to Shabistari, it's very clear, yes, because it's the revelation of absolute divine mystery. So basically, Lahiji explains that it is the state of bi-khudi, divanegi. When the person is in the state of ecstasy, he's not conscious. He utters the word, not to compete with God, not to say I am the God. This is the state of ecstasy. Why the created one, human being, is called united with him? How was his wayfaring attained? By estrangement from own self, the ego, the I-ness. What's the unity between necessity and the created one, contingent? What are the closeness and separation? Orb and bod. I'm using the Arabic word, so you could connect. And what's the definition of unity and multiplicity? You see that in Gulshan we keep having this repetition of Wahdat and Kasrat. It's full of narrative to me, from closeness to him. You are separated from self. The being is the manifestation of non-being. Adam versus Wujud. So Wujud comes from Adam. What is the sea whose shore is the speech? The sea refers to the divine existence, and the speech refers to the note, ghalam, what is being distributed, what is being said about God. Because we talk about God, we talk about our spiritual experiences. In that, even the note, even the word comes from him. So he is the sea. We are in the hand of that sea. We are coming from him. How are eternal, qadim, separated from temporal, hadis, that the former became God and the latter became the universe? And the answer, eternal and temporal are not separated from one another because everything comes from him in Sheikh Mahmoud's doctrine. The non-existent has its being from the existence. And the last three questions, it's a poetic metaphor, philosophical metaphor, talks about God's beauty, divine's manifestation, Jalal and Jamal. If we have time, I will go through that explanation. It's one of the doctrine of Ibn Arabi. So they refer to his vat, his tajalli, and the disclosure of divine or divineness of God. And each represents or manifests his beauty, his tajalli. And the ideal Christianity is a symbol for bond of obedience. Now let us look at Lahiji's, a little bit who Lahiji was and how he interpreted Sheikh Mahmoud's Gulshan-i Raz. He was a devoted Sufi from Nurbakhshiya order. At the beginning of his commentary, Mafatihul Ijaz, he mentions that for 16 years he was the student of Nurbakhsh. And he had a khanaqah in Shiraz, a Sufi center, and he would receive students and disciples. He used to wear a black outfit, khirqa. And there is an anecdote that he was questioned by the Safavid Shah, Shah Ismail, that why he's wearing black, and his response was in honor of commemoration of Imam Hussein, the third Imam of Shi'a. Also, in one of the verses that he write commentary in Gulshan, he explains that the color black is a metaphor for the divine self-exposure, tajalli. God's color or the color of the divine manifestation is black. That means due to the nearness, orb of the Sufi with the divine light is manifested in black, which covers the eyes and prevents the Sufi to apprehend the divine essence. It refers to the power of that light. And the title of the commentary is Mafatihul Ijaz fi Sharh Gulshan-i Raz. Toward the end of this commentary, we see his genealogy. The genealogy shows that he takes pride and great honor on his Sufi and his Shia background, 12 Shia background. He starts from Nurbakhshiya order, and you can see some of the famous Sufis' names, Sheikh Najmuddin Kubra, Sohrawardi, Najib al-Sohrawardi, Ahmad Ghazali, and continues with Maghribi, Sari Sagati, Ma'ruf Karhi, until he comes to Imam Raza, starts from the 8th Imam, comes to, he calls it Imam al-Awliya, Ali al-Murtaza. Often when he talks about Imam Ali, he calls him Ali al-Murtaza as a matter of honor. And then Khatam al-Anbiya, Muhammad Mustafa. That's his genealogy. He embarked on writing Mafatihul Ijaz at the request of some people in his circle, exactly like Samuddin Chalabi, who did that, who encouraged Rumi to write the Masnavi. Lahiji comes from Harabi's, counts Harabi's question as 18, as I mentioned, and structures his commentary based on those 18 questions. And the commentary demonstrates his heavy influence by the school of Ibn Arabi, provides few direct references to Ibn Arabi, just a few to Fusus al-Hikam and Futuhat, but mainly he quotes from Maghribi, Dawood Ghaysari, and Fakhruddin Iraqi. Also, he quotes from Persian poets like Sanai, Attar, and Rumi. Lahiji's commentary is very comprehensive. He covers the entire poem. He gives references to Quran, to Hadith. And as for the purpose of writing the commentary is to avoid the complicated rhetoric. He tries to be simple, even though the text is heavy and rich, to clarify the difficulties, because the poem is full of riddle. It's Akbarian terminologies formed or appeared or crafted in the form of poetry. Those who are not familiar with the poetry, it's a language of metaphor and symbolism. And when you bring in Ibn Arabi, it's really a mystical riddle that needs to be deduced and uncovered. So to unravel the mystery and to assist the readers to comprehend the meaning of the verses so that everyone can grasp from the spiritual taste and ذوق. So the first question, نخست از فکر خویشم در تحیر چه چیز است آنکه گویندش تفکر. What is this tafakkur? And he starts answering. What is tafakkur? Shabistari differentiates between two types of knowledge. One knowledge is beneficial to human soul. which brings awareness of the truth, haq, and intensifies human consciousness. And the other knowledge is harmful one and scatters and brings distractions. Lahiji provides extra information and believes that, with the brief explanation on the notion of false, batil, and truth, haq. According to Lahiji, tafakkur for the Sufi is entering the path to receive spiritual unveiling, kashf, shuhud. So, okay, so then I will go through quickly. I'm sorry about that. But at least I walked you through the garden. That was very important. So I'll give you very briefly be generous with me with 1 or 2 minutes. Thank you. So the truth means experiencing the state of annihilation, fana, and stay in that stage, baqa. And the first thing which is necessary for Muslims is knowledge of God, ma'rifatullah, which is that knowledge is divided into two, iktisabi or istidlali, or kashfi or dhawqi. The first one you can learn in school by reading, learning, and intellectual activities. The second one, really it happens in the heart. It needs God's blessing. And he maintains the real knowledge can be experienced through spiritual ascendance, sayr ilallah. And the meaning of tafakkur in this verse is the Sufi's spiritual quest for the purpose of revelation so that he can put multiplicity or takassur and ta'ayyunat behind and reach the truth. And reaching the station of annihilation and baqa, fana and baqa. According to Lahiji, seeing the universal in partial. What is the partial that we can see in universal? Again, refers to the state of hal and experiencing annihilation and going behind ta'ayyunat. This is important. Shabistari divides or believes in gradation of tafakkur. Tafakkur doesn't come at once. First, a concept appears in the mind. You contemplate on it. You engage in that purification of heart. If I want to really summarize, the initial concept comes to the mind, then appears and forms in the heart. You contemplate, you meditate, then go from tasawwur into tazakkur. You remember, you meditate, then it's a tadabbur, and at the end you acquire tafakkur, and that tafakkur leads to the truth. Lahiji maintains the image of, as I explained, it's an engagement. And he quotes from Imam Ali, Imam al-Awliya, because this happens in the heart. You don't really see God. To emphasize on his notion, he quotes from Imam Ali, hadith. One day, Sa'lab Yamani asked from Imam Ali Murtaza, that, Ya Ali, have you seen your God? And Ali replied, shall I worship what I have not seen? I saw him, I knew him, thus I worshipped him. I shall not worship a God that I don't see. So this kind of knowledge, this kind of tafakkur, it's not an intellectual activity. Ali didn't learn it at school. He experienced it through meditation. And Sufis and Ibn Arabi, since I don't have time, I'm going to bring from the end to here the idea of awliya, that according to Ibn Arabi, followed by Haydar Amali, and here by Lahiji and Shabistari, the door of contemplation and spiritual zawq and kashf is open to awliya. And Lahiji contemplates on that and elaborates on that by revealing a vision, and he discusses this vision. This is his example of tafakkur. Also, Haydar Amali, I discussed it in my paper. Haydar Amali has an example of this vision. In year 858, during the time when I was isolated in a 40-day retreat, in Persian we call it chilla, in Arabic arba'in, I experienced a state of ecstasy. So I traveled through the air and flying over a large city. I was flying, I ascended from the lower sky to the first heaven, Osman Awwal, and totally emerged and became totally one with it. I witnessed many mysterious wonders there, many ajaib. And then he recounts, I went to the second heaven, third, until the seventh heaven. I burned, I became totally annihilated. fana. I saw that I was intoxicated, ecstasy, drunkardness, and selflessly ecstatic. Then I was recovered from that state. I found myself overcome by such spiritual madness, divanagi, and ecstasy, bikhudi, and I lost my reason, my conscience. That intoxication lasted for several days until, by the good guidance of Imam Zaman, refers to Mahdi. So again, on the concept of Khatam al-Awliya, that Ibn Arabi believes in Ali and himself, on the limited Vilayat Mutlaq, Vilayat Muqayyada, Haydar Amuli, and here we see the role of Mahdi as the last Imam, as the last of Awliya. Lahiji's narration of his spiritual vision reflects on the importance of visionary dreams among Sufis and Shi'a. Often you can't see this in the real life, so a vision is important. And the image, the vision, and going from one sky to another sky reflects on the importance of Mi'raj. Again, I don't have time. According to Ibn Arabi, Mi'raj for Prophet Muhammad was more spiritual, and it can happen to awliya, to Sufis. He himself experienced it. Bayazid Bassami, Ushairi experienced it, and here Amuli experienced it, and here Lahiji mentions to that example of Mi'raj. And through this spiritual ascension, human version of it, since Prophet made it, awliya could do it. Through this mystical journey, the door of kashf will be open and the truth can be attained. And another aspect of this Lahiji's dream is the reference to importance of Mahdi. And I will go quickly to the concluding remarks, so I have time. If not, because I would like to make a remark on, okay, then I will skip because I just wanted to summarize. I will put it like this so you can read. I have made an observation. And my observation is, working on Rumi's poetry, Rumi's Masnavi, I noticed numerous commentaries have been written on Rumi's Masnavi in Indian subcontinent, in Ottoman society. Most of them, like Wali Muhammad Akbar Abadi's commentary, Bahrul Ulum from subcontinent, and in Turkey during the Ottoman, Shami Effendi, Ismail Angaravi, Sururi, they all read Rumi's poetry through the lens of Ibn Arabi. As though Rumi's Sufism is not serious enough, let's bring in some Ibn Arabi terminologies to make it more serious, or to give some legitimacy. It becomes confusing. Language of Rumi is simple because it has, in the Masnavi you have anecdotes, you have stories. Before going to the final conclusion and those theological results, Rumi opens it and making it simple. When we bring in Ibn Arabi's thought, it's not clear, is it Rumi talking or Ibn Arabi? Here, I see Lahiji is doing the opposite. There are sections that Sheikh Mahmoud mentions some anecdotes, some examples that Rumi also mentioned it. For example, I'll give you an example. It's the story of Moses walking in the Mount Sinai. And he wants to see God's Vajh. He wants to see God. And Arani, the God says, Lantarani. We have it in the Masnavi, Lahiji brings it. It makes sense, that's fine. But there are cases that Sheikh Mahmoud uses certain concepts, Sufi concept, and Lahiji brings more from Attar and Rumi. Again, this is Akbarian thought in the form of poetry, through the language, through the word of Sheikh Mahmoud. My observation was sometimes it becomes confusing when we mix different form of Sufism. Each scholar has its own language, metaphors. It's like we should read, for example, Al-Isharat wa Tanbihat with the help of more later Sufis. Avicenna has its own language. That was my observation. Sorry if I was wrong. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, now we will turn to questions. We have about 10 minutes for questions. Mohammed, and then Sayyid Nizam.
Thank you very much, Eliza. That was a wonderful talk. And, you spoke so eloquently about, especially Mahmoud Shabistari in this particular book. Many people who know the book have the feeling, like I've heard, many of my own teachers and others say, that it really is it's a treasure to humanity, that book. It's surprising. Like I tell this to my students sometimes. I say it's amazing that in, let's say, a humanities program or in a philosophy department, we could be reading Kant, but we're not reading Mahmoud Shabistari. This makes no sense, especially those who know the text. Remember that line? Zahi nadan ku khurshid taban, be nur sham juya dar biyaban. And he gives the reason why. So how many a fool is there who goes out in broad daylight in the middle of the desert with a candle in his hand looking for the sun, right? So in many ways he has all of these like amazing observations, as you know so well. So my question really has to do with how can we use this book to really educate people, not just about the Islamic tradition, but about really this way of looking at things from the perspective of Wahdat, as he does. You can imagine it in a first year, freshman, one of those prose seminars or whatever, as mandatory reading. That would make total sense. Next to the Epic of Gilgamesh, something like that.
First of all, I'm sorry that I couldn't really cover everything. I completely lost the concept of time. It's not really a poetry. It's really a condensed form of Islamic philosophy or Akbarian philosophy. I would say definitely the readers back home, while many years ago, when I was studying Masnavi with a group of students and a teacher, we started Masnavi and we had, because it's a common tradition, gather in homes, in sessions. It's like a maktab style, read Hafiz, Rumi, and Quran. And also once a week we had Shabistari. We had no clue. And we would ask, what is Sari? What is Jari? What is God's essence, existence? Because it wasn't malmus for us. But later on, just to answer a very short, succinct, I would say, for example, teaching Rumi's Masnavi with the help of some Sufism, you can engage more easily. For Shabistari, I would say the readers should have familiarities with the school of Ibn Arabi, and it should be taught definitely at the school of philosophy. And let's say you're well versed and you're familiar, you have been publishing on this topic. If your students come just from the literature background, you really need to open the concept of Wahdat, Kesrat. You noticed not just one line, different lines. He mentioned Wahdat, Kesrat. What is this Kesrat that comes from Wahdat? What is this Tajalli? Sometimes he uses Kesrat just as a word Kesrat, sometimes as Ta'ayyunat. Then the students would say, then what is Ta'ayyunat? What is A'yan? What is just the word Kesrat? I would say definitely familiarity. It's a very important book. It needs familiarity with the school of Ibn Arabi, not just Sufism. Sufism would be the base, really, requirement, but familiarity with the Shaykh al-Akbar and his terminologies, because he has his own wording. I would say it's short, it's condensed, it's very rich. You can cover it, like what we did at McGill, for example. We studied Ghazali with Ormsby, for example. You cannot cover the entire book, but you can start, even you cover Wahdat. As you see for the paper, I just covered the first 2 verses, which already had Wahdat. You can pick, if that was your question, you can just choose the central poem or lines that manifest the main doctrine of Ibn Arabi. At least the students can have familiarity, and it's a language of poetry, even though it's a heavy poetry, but it could be a bit pleasant.
Kind of like an anthologized.
Yes, but definitely anthology, epistemology, because it talks about universe, cosmos. It's, as I said, it's like a harem. At the end, when you finish the book, you will see that it's God at the center. It's somewhere he mentions Ghab Ghusayn. We come from him and Mi'raj. We go back to him, Ma'ad, concept of Ma'ad. You can deduce all of these aspects. But again, the basic familiarity, I would say Wahdat would be, like Insan Kamil. If you choose some topics and you have in your mind that this semester or for this purpose, I'm going to cover certain topics, some questions. It's 15 questions. Even if you choose like 1 or 2 questions, the whole world will open. It's rich. Shabistari is very rich.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Tasbihi, for a very interesting lecture. I look forward to reading your paper. I'm interested in some of the literary aspect or the symbolism, really, of that is discussed in the actual Gulshan-i Raz, and then I'm curious to see what is said in the commentary, because there's a lot of images that spread all across Persian and Persianate literatures, like also reflected also in Urdu, Ottoman, Chagatai, etc. And one of these is this image of the ruins, kharabat. Like Ibn Hafiz, for example, very famous verses, Dar kharabat mughan nur khuda mi binam. So what does he say about, like seeing this light? Or, does he have a kind of, obviously that's Hafiz, but in terms of the kharabat as a place of enlightenment, the ruined fire temple of the Zoroastrians, as it were. So if you could perhaps address that. I know that in the Gulshan there's maybe like a dozen or more verses about kharabat, so just curious if you can shed some light on that. Thank you.
Kharabat in Sheikh Mahmoud's poetry refers to the heart. And Lahiji quotes from Ibn Arabi, the first thing that God in human being, when he created human being, he created a Kaaba in that body, and that Kaaba was his heart. Also Shams Tabrizi refers to the heart. Heart has a very important place. Kharabat is the place that you see Nur Khuda, God's light. And the contemplation goes through the heart. They don't say that it's an intellectual activity. It's a heart, it's an inner activity. And often Sufis would say it is a given knowledge. It's not something that you have to work hard. Definitely you have to work on your ego, for sure, to become qabil, to acquire, to attain this spirituality and grace. So it needs a hard work. But that revelation comes through the heart. It opens the heart, and that's the kharabat. That why kharabat? Kharab means kharab, something which is ruined. You have to ruin your ego. You have to ruin your selfness, your I-ness. You don't see, it comes to the black color. You don't see anything except Wajhullah. And that vision comes through the heart, not with the physical. You need to practice. That's what Lahiji says. So the eye doesn't see anything but Wajhullah.
What is interesting?
That was really a summary of.
I like that, but what is very interesting is to the best of my knowledge, you don't have that in Ibn Arabi. It's a Persian image. It's a very Iranian thing.
But
in pre-Islamic poetry, you have like churches and stuff like this, but I don't know.
Oh, you mean the kharabat? Because Ibn Arabi has heart.
Yeah.
But, each poet, that they have their own terminologies that you see. Hafiz has kharabat. I'm sure Sana'i Attar has kharabat, definitely. And each have their own. But kharabat, I don't think, I know some scholars when it comes to Hafiz, they would say he was a very rend poet. He would drink. Or he would practice. I'm not a Hafiz scholar, but there are interpretation, poetic interpretation or Sufi interpretation. But definitely, Kharabat is a place, it's like a Sufi center that you connect. But again, Kharab is somewhere that you really ruin your I-ness. And you go somewhere in that place in a kind of form of 40 retreat, a challa or arba'in. You practice, it's a form of meditation, it's a house of meditation. In this context, since Ibn Arabi says, heart is the Kaaba of the body that God created, so I would see that Lahiji would say, this is the kharabat. That's my understanding.
Yeah, thank you so much for a beautiful talk. Actually, it was very inspiring to now read more of this poetry. I just have I think it's more of a language question. Is when you talked about knowledge is kashafi and istidali, is ilm husuli and ilm huduri?
Exactly.
Is that what it is? Okay.
It's just a different format. Rumi has ilm husuli, ilm shuhudi, ilm kasbi. There are different divisions of that Rumi has, especially in book 4 of the Masnavi. Here, istidlali and kashfi. That's true.
Thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.